Welcome back to the new session on ethics. Here we discuss the scope of ethics. Definition of ethics. The word ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos, which means character, and from the Latin word mores, which means customs. Derived from the Greek word ethos, which means way of living, ethics is a branch of philosophy that is concerned with human conduct. It consists in a code of conduct of human beings living in a society. Ethics examines the rational justification for our moral judgments. It studies what is morally right or wrong, just or unjust. Together, they combine to define how individuals choose to interact with one another. In philosophy, ethics defines what is good for the individual and for society and establish the nature of duties that people owe to themselves and to one another. It aims at individual good as well as social good, the good of mankind as a whole. Ethics is an attempt to guide human conduct, and it is also an attempt to help man in leading good life by applying moral principles. Ethics refers to well-based standards of right and wrong that prescribe what humans ought to do, usually in terms of rights, obligations, benefits to society, fairness, or specific virtues. Ethics is related to issues of property, rightness, and wrongness. What is right is ethical and what is wrong is unethical. The words proper, fair, and just are also used in place of right and ethical. If it is ethical, it is right, proper, fair, and just. Ethics is a matter of practical concern. It tries to determine the good and the right thing to do, choices regarding right and wrong, good and evil, questions of obligation and value. Ethics is to consider the practice of doing right actions, or what we may call the art of living the good life. Literally, ethics means the science of the customs or habits of men. It is the science of habitual conduct of men. Habits are the expressions of settled dispositions of the will or character. Character is the permanent habit of willing, the inner bent of the mind which is expressed in habitual conduct. Character is the inner counterpart of the conduct which is its outer expression. Thus, ethics is the science of character and conduct. It evaluates the voluntary action and habitual actions of persons and considers their rightness and wrongness. It evaluates the character of persons and considers its virtuousness and viciousness. It is also defined as the science of the highest good. McKinsey defines ethics as the study of what is right or good in human conduct, or the science of the ideal involved in human life. So, it is clear that ethics is the study which determines rightness or wrongness of actions. But in order to inquire into the ideal of conduct, it must know the nature of conduct. Conduct is the expression of character. Character is the settled habit of will. It is the permanent disposition produced by habitual actions. Nature of ethics. Ethics aims at systematic knowledge of human character. So, ethics is a science. Every science is concerned with a particular sphere of nature. As a science, ethics has its own particular sphere. It deals with certain judgments that we make about human conduct. It deals with systematic explanation of rightness or wrongness in the light of the highest good of man. Ethics is a normative science. Ethics is a normative science. It is concerned with what ought to be done rather than what is the case. It differs from positive science. A positive science, natural science, or descriptive science is concerned with what is. It deals with facts and explains them by their causes. In positive science, there is no question of judging its objects in any way. But ethics does not deal with fact. Rather, it deals with value. Therefore, it is clear that ethics is concerned with judgments of value while positive science deal with judgments of facts. That is why ethics is not a positive science but a normative science. Normative ethics deals with standards or norms by which we can judge human actions to be right or wrong. For example, logic and aesthetics are also considered as normative sciences because logic and aesthetics are concerned with truth and beauty. So, truth, beauty and value are the three ideals of logic, aesthetics and ethics respectively. Ethics is not a practical science. Ethics is not a practical science. Practical science deals with means for the realization of an end or ideal. It teaches us to know how to do. As for instance, medical science is a practical science. It concerns with the means in order to remove the causes of ailments or diseases. But ethics is not concerned with means in order to achieve moral ideal, that is rightness or goodness. It does not teach us how to live a moral life. So, ethics cannot be regarded as a practical science. Ethics is not an art. Ethics is not an art. Ethics does not teach us an art as to how to lead a moral life. Rather, it helps us to justify rightness or goodness, which can lead to the supreme goal of human life, that is to realize the summum bonum of human life. So, ethics is not a means to the highest ideal of human life. But, like the practical science, art is also a means for obtaining a goal. So, ethics is neither a practical science nor an art. Again, the question is there any art of conduct? The reply is, in case of morality, this is not true. Art especially deals with acquisition of skill to produce objects, while morality deals with motive, intention, purpose and choice, which are considered right or wrong in the light of goodness. Therefore, morality consists of goodness, which is really an intrinsic end. A norm or ideal in the ethical sense is defined as any regulatory principle that controls or lays guidelines to thought and mode of acting. Ethics is a science of values as it discovers the forms of conduct or behavior which have the character of oughtness. Ethics deals with moral phenomena and it observes and classifies them and explains them by the moral ideal. It distinguishes moral judgments from logical judgments and aesthetic judgments and reduces them to a system. So, we may define the nature of ethics as scientific. However, from another perspective, all sciences also led to philosophical questions if we take philosophy to be quest for knowledge. That is why ethics is a branch of philosophy. Scope of ethics. Ethics is concerned with the highest good or absolute good. It investigates the nature of its fundamental notions, that is right, duty and good. The scope of ethics indicates its subject matter. Ethics as normative science deals with the moral ideal or the good in order to enquire the nature of our conduct. It enquires into the nature of the springs of actions, motives, intentions, voluntary actions and so on. It determines rightness or wrongness of human actions. It does not enquire into the origin and growth of human conduct. As a science of morality, ethics discusses the contents of moral consciousness and the various problems of moral consciousness. Moral judgments passed on or voluntary actions are also included within the scope of ethics. In discussing the moral judgment, it has also to concern with the nature, object, faculty and standard of moral judgment. Moral sentiments and feelings are arising in our mind when we contemplate about the moral judgment, and therefore, ethics has to discuss the nature of moral sentiments to moral judgment. Ethics also discusses the nature of human freedom and ethics investigates what constitutes good or bad, just or unjust. It also raises some questions like what is virtue, what is law, what is conscience, what is duty, what obligations are common to all, what is the good in all good acts, what is the good or the moral ideal, what is the summum bonum or the chief good, what is the good in all good acts, etc. All these questions lie within the scope of ethics. The sense of duty, oughtness or moral obligation and the responsibility for actions are also included within the range of ethics. Ethics is not only a guidebook of moral rules as a branch of philosophy, but also seeks clarification of terms used in moral language. The meta-ethical problems fall within the scope of philosophical aspect of ethics. Ethics is related to other branches of knowledge. Ethics is essentially related to all other branches of knowledge like sociology, political science, jurisprudence, law and legal study, psychology, anthropology, culture study, ecology, environmental study, economics, religion, aesthetics and other similar areas. Ethics is concerned with political, sociological, cultural, psychical, economic, environmental, religious problems in pursuit of highest good. So, these problems have an additional place in the scope of ethics. With the emergence of new technology, there is scope for widening the scope of ethics to address new issues. Applied ethics is the practice of ethics that aims to guide the moral judgment governing the decisions we make in all areas of our lives. Issues of right and wrong are related to one's values. In the context of ethics, values are our standards of right and wrong. Now, philosophies have become more scientific and sciences have become more philosophical. The distinction between science and philosophy and between value science like ethics and general philosophy is a matter of degree. In that way, ethics is both scientific and philosophical, both descriptive and normative science and both pure and applied, pure ethics and metaethics. Ethics is an art as it sets guidelines for practical conduct and also for understanding the meaning of what it is to act in an ethical manner. Ethics is concerned with goodness as an ultimate value, while some other normative sciences like aesthetics and logic are oriented to the ideals of beauty and truth respectively. No clear-cut boundary between science and philosophy, between descriptive science and normative science, and between ethics and philosophy is possible. Ethics is sometimes said to be the science of character. But in order to inquire into the nature of character, ethics must inquire into the nature of the springs of actions, motives, intentions, voluntary actions, and non-voluntary actions, and so on. Thus, ethics must be founded on psychological basis. But ethics inquires into the springs of actions, motives, intention and voluntary actions only to pass moral judgments upon them. The fundamental problem of ethics is the nature or the moral ideal or standard with reference to which we pass moral judgments. Ethics is concerned with the highest or absolute good. Thus, the fundamental notions of ethics are right, duty and good, the nature of which it investigates. Ethics is concerned with the nature, object, faculty and standard of moral judgments. Moral judgments are accompanied by moral sentiments. Example, the feelings of approval and disapproval, remorse and the like. Ethics has to discuss the nature of moral sentiments and the relation of moral sentiments to moral judgments. Moral judgments are also accompanied by the sense of duty, oughtness or moral obligation. When we perceive an act to be right, we feel under a moral obligation to do it. When we perceive an act to be wrong, we feel under moral obligation not to do it. Ethics has to account for this sense of duty or moral obligation. This also raises questions like what is the nature of moral obligation? What is the origin of moral obligation? What is the source of moral obligation? To whom are we responsible for our conduct, etc. Our right actions have merit, our wrong actions have demerit. Ethics inquires into the criterion of merit and demerit. It tries to find out what makes an action meritorious. Merit and demerit are called deserts. They are investigated by ethics. Ethics assumes the freedom of the will. It discusses the nature of human freedom. We are responsible for our actions. Ethics inquires into the nature of responsibility. Criminals are responsible for their crimes, so they ought to be punished. Ethics gives the moral justification for punishment. Ethics determines the nature and kinds of rights, duties, and virtues determined by the ultimate moral standard. Virtue and vice are also within its scope. Problems of ethics. The psychological problems with which ethics is concerned are those of the nature of voluntary actions, classifications of the springs of actions, and the relation between desire and pleasure. The philosophical problems are those of the essential nature of human personality, the freedom of the will, immortality of the soul, existence and perfection of God, and the moral governing of the universe. The sociological problem is that of the relation of the individual to the state, of the ethical basis and moral functions of the state, and of international morality. Thus, even though it has a province of its own, it is not separate from other disciplines. The notions of rightness and wrongness of conduct are derived from it. This is the theoretical aim of ethics. Though ethics is not a practical science, it deduces concrete duties and virtues from the notion of the supreme good, which may guide us in the regulation of our conduct. Ethics is a theoretical science. It is not a practical science. It does not teach us how we can lead a moral life, but the study of duties and virtues deduced by it from the supreme good has an indirect bearing upon our practical life and regulates our conduct. Theory is expressed in practice. Ethics is theory of morality. It converts moral faith into a rational insight. It criticizes the common notions of morality and discovers the rational and essential elements in them. A science is criticism of common sense. So ethics, as the science of morality, criticizes vague and sometimes inaccurate popular notions of right and wrong. It exposes the defects and inconsistencies of the social customs and usages, social, political, and religious institutions, and gives us a real insight into the nature of the moral ideal. Ethics attacks the basis of popular morality and places on a secure footing all that is valid and essential in morality. By reflective criticism, ethics prepares the way for its constructive function. It separates the essential from the inessential, the permanent from the transitory, and rationalizes our notions of right and wrong. Ethics indirectly exerts a paramount influence on all departments of practical life. The right solution of the vital problems of religion, politics, economics, legislature, education, etc. depends upon the correct notions of right and wrong. Religion must have foundation in ethics. Divorced from morality, it degenerates into superstitions, blind belief in superhuman power, black magic, and the like. Politics should be molded by ethics. Might should be based upon right, and immoral laws should be abolished. Laws should be enacted for the improvement of the moral well-being of the people. Economics should be based on ethics. Production, distribution, and consumption of wealth should be based on justice and equality. In education, ethics is to decide what impulses and dispositions in children should be strength, suit, and what should be suppressed. Ethics should embrace of departments of human actions, exert an evaluating influence upon them, and raise humanity to a higher level. The end or aim of ethics is to define the nature of the highest good of man as a member of society. It investigates the nature of the summum bonum, which is the highest personal good and the highest social good. It is the root of all moral distinctions. Applied ethics. The contemporary field of applied ethics arose in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Today, it is a thriving part of the field of ethics. Numerous books and websites are devoted to topics such as business ethics, computer ethics, and engineering ethics. There is enormous scope for ethics today. The fields like environmental ethics, business ethics, and cyber ethics are some examples. The development of science and technology has opened ways to vast areas for applying ethical theories. There is scope for widening the scope of ethics to address new issues. Now, let us summarize the session. Ethics is a branch of philosophy that is concerned with human conduct. It consists in a code of conduct of human beings living in a society. Ethics examines the rational justification for our moral judgments. It studies what is morally right or wrong, just or unjust. Ethics is an attempt to guide human conduct, and it also helps an attempt to help man in leading good life by applying moral principles. Ethics is concerned with the highest good or absolute good. It investigates the nature of its fundamental notions, that is right, duty, and good. The scope of ethics indicates its subject matter. Ethics as normative science deals with moral ideal or the good in order to inquire the nature of our conduct. The fundamental problem of ethics is the nature or the moral ideal or standard with reference to which we pass moral judgments. With the emergence of new technology, there is scope for widening the scope of ethics to address new issues. Applied ethics is the practice of ethics that aims to guide the moral judgment governing the decisions we make in all areas of our lives. Issues of right and wrong are related to one's values. In the context of ethics, values are standards of right and wrong. Ethics is theory of morality. It converts moral faith into a rational insight. It criticizes the common notions of morality and discovers the rational and essential elements in them. Ethics indirectly exerts a paramount influence on all departments of practical life. The entire aim of ethics is to define the nature of the highest good of man as a member of society. It investigates the nature of the summum bonum, which is the highest personal good and the highest social good. It is the root of all moral distinctions. The development of science and technology has opened ways to vast areas for applying ethical theories, and there is scope for widening the scope of ethics to address new issues. There are some assignments for you. 1. Critically evaluate the contemporary relevance of ethics. Number 2. Distinguish between positive science and normative science. Number 3. Write an account of the meaning of ethics. Number 4. Discuss the scope of ethics. Number 5. Examine the problems in ethics. I can suggest some books for your further studies. A Manual of Ethics written by Jadunath Sinha, published by Sinha Publishing House Private Limited, Calcutta in 1976. Ethics written by Professor Sanyal J. and Professor Malik K.N., published by Shribhumi Publishing Company, Calcutta in 1965. The Dimensions of Ethics, an Introduction to Ethical Theory, written by Wilfred J. Valucho, published by Broadview Press in 2003. Hope you enjoyed the session. Let's meet in another session. Until then, bye.